3, 2, 1. Okay, we're not celebrating New Year's Eve today, but we are going to talk to you today about the differences that we've experienced celebrating New Year's in both Denmark and in the United States. And one of the most obvious things is the time difference. So, of course, at midnight in Denmark, it's only 6 p.m. on the east coast of the US, where most of our friends and family live, and that actually makes it a nice way for us to get in touch with them, whether it's sending a text message or by FaceTime, when they're just getting ready to start celebrating New Year's Eve, even though it's midnight in Denmark.
Yeah, and the time zones aren't the only time difference we've experienced living in Denmark versus in the US. In the US, it's typical for stores to close a little bit early, but still be open into the evening time to pick up things from the grocery store or the liquor store that you need. Not in Denmark, and we discovered this when we were hosting our first New Year's Eve party when we figured that we could sleep in coming back from the States, go to the grocery store at say 3, 4 o'clock, pick up what we needed to get, no big deal. People weren't coming over till 8. Well, we discovered that everything closes early if they're even open at all on New Year's Eve. And when we tried to go to the grocery store at 3 o'clock, we discovered there was only a single Netto in the whole city of Copenhagen that was open. So we had to race over there and get whatever they had left on the shelves. Otherwise, our party was going to be catered by 7-Eleven.
Yeah, we definitely weren't used to or ready for kind of the differences between Denmark and the US. We should have made this video or watched something like this before that. I definitely remember times in Philadelphia where we would go out at 9 p.m. and buy some extra champagne for the evening, and that's something that I don't think would be possible in Denmark, and we learned that one the hard way. Now, while everybody is different in both countries, one of the main differences, I think, is in New Year's dinner. So what we've done most often in Denmark and in Copenhagen this year we're doing is getting catered food. So we're getting a 3-course meal that's mostly prepared but needs to be heated up by us, and we're having a little dinner party with friends. We've also heard that boiled cod could be something that is prepared, or pork with kale. That's not necessarily on our menu this year, but we've heard that that's also something that is traditional. But one thing that we know is traditional in both Denmark and Norway is the kransekage, which translates to wreath cake. Of course, there's a cake for almost every celebration in Denmark, and we're going to have one for our New Year's dinner, and I think a lot of people around Denmark will too.
Yeah, and in the US, it's maybe not the same kind of more strict tradition that you have here in Denmark. Different people may take different things from their heritage or their ethnicity that they choose to have for a New Year's Eve meal, but typically it tends to be a little bit more freelance in the US, kind of like we've talked about with Christmas meals. It's kind of whatever you, your family, your friends choose to do. It's not the same kind of structure maybe that you see here in Denmark. So, I know that we've done different things for dinner where it's been prepared food that we made. I think one year we made like lasagna and other foods on that. In my family, sometimes it would be make your own pizza as you're sitting in and kind of taking the New Year's Eve. It's not nearly as formal as it tends to be in Denmark, and tends to be a little bit more low-key. A whole night of just appetizers is often what you'll find if you go to a New Year's party in the States.
But the one thing that is common is lots of drinks and lots of champagne.
I think that's universal. Another thing that's probably universal is fireworks, though we have to say, you Danes take it to the extreme. Now, we've heard that fireworks are only legal in Denmark for a few days a year, and it seems like everybody uses that year-end bonus to go buy the fireworks. It is absolutely an amateur show all over, at least the city of Copenhagen. I'm sure it's the same across the country, where literally as soon as the sun starts going down in the afternoon, fireworks start going off until the wee hours of the morning. And it's not just on New Year's Eve, but on some of the days leading up to it as well. So I'm always amazed on how much money people have to spend on fireworks in Denmark, because it is absolutely shows all over the city, and kind of a little scary sometimes too.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's 100% legal or just tolerated. Like, maybe a lot of things sometimes happen in Denmark. But in the United States, I would say fireworks are always present at New Year's Eve, but a little bit different. I think it's because a lot of localities, a lot of cities and municipalities will hold their own fireworks shows. So it's very common for a city like Philadelphia, where we come from, to have a New Year's Eve fireworks show at midnight. Now, that doesn't mean that some people won't also shoot off their own fireworks, but because you can usually buy them all year round, it's not that special to have fireworks. Although I will say, in our old neighborhood of South Philadelphia, people are pretty similar to what we experience in Copenhagen, where there is a lot of fireworks going off in the street, and it almost seems a little bit dangerous, but maybe not 100% legal, but certainly tolerated on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I know the first year that we lived down there, I parked my car at the end of a street, and I suddenly realized that was the launching zone, and wasn't sure if my car was going to make it out. The neighborhood smells like gunpowder by the time you get to midnight. It's a fun experience. And honestly, it was new for me because in the state where I grew up, fireworks are illegal. So you really don't have the fireworks shows that go off in the same way that I experienced when I moved to Philly.
Yeah, but now we can make up for it in Copenhagen.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, on New Year's Eve in both countries, we also watch television. And in Denmark, it's a pretty set regimen. I think part of the reason that things close early, as we mentioned before, is that every year at 6 p.m., we are enjoying the Queen's speech. So the Queen gives a New Year's Eve address to the entire country of Denmark, and it's in Danish, but we are at a level in our Danish where we can understand and enjoy most of the speech. And it's also rife for a little bit of fun because most of the mentions are pretty standard. So you'll have her mention things like her summer trip to Greenland and the Faroe Islands, or thanking the troops, or a message to the young people of Denmark. And that actually makes it very nice to have a little drinking game so you can take a sip every time she mentions some of these old classics that are in every speech of her New Year's address. And of course, just before midnight, we also watch a special little British comedy show from 1963. It's in black and white, and it's called A Dinner for One or 90th Birthday Party, depending on what you know it as. But it's a fun comedy sketch show that is a New Year's classic, not just in Denmark, but I think also in Sweden, Holland, Germany, and millions of people watch it every year. I had never heard of it until we moved to Denmark, but I love it. And of course, that's everything that you would do going up to midnight, with, of course, some gaps that you can fill in and kind of curate your own evening in between those two must-watch portions of television.
Yeah, the same procedure as every year, right, Derek?
Yeah, of course.
Now, in the U.S., it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more of a variety show kind of feel. Now, each of the major networks typically will have some of their hosts. It's usually hosted from Times Square in New York City, which tends to be the center of activity for the U.S. It's where the ball famously drops at midnight or over the top of Times Square, and you have thousands of revelers in the streets that are, stuck in these little, I don't know why anyone would want to go do that. You're kind of stuck in these little pens down there. It's cold outside.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's very fun. But it all kind of started, so the classic one growing up was the Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve, where Dick Clark, who was a longtime TV host in the U.S., would always host his show from Times Square, and there'd be a bunch of musical guests that would be on there, and different artists that were performing, and different things like that. So it's a little more of a variety show that goes on, and it starts probably around like 9 o'clock or so, and it goes on well after midnight as well. They usually have performances going from Los Angeles as well. So as it's still before midnight there, you have artists that are performing there. So it's more of kind of a fun little festival atmosphere for New Year's that everybody tunes in for on whatever channel they enjoy.
Yeah, it could be your whole evening, and really having 4 time zones in the continental U.S. means that, every hour you get something a little bit special where they celebrate in each part of the country. I know this year Miley Cyrus is hosting with Dolly Parton. I would probably watch that one, yeah. But, I still will take the Queen's speech, and our other Queen, Dolly Parton, can have her own show in the U.S.
So obviously New Year's Eve is just all about counting down until the main event that happens at midnight. And in Denmark, it actually was surprisingly low key when we first experienced it. I mean, you have the nice ritual of the Queen's speech or the 90th birthday party, and then the camera just focuses on the clock tower at Copenhagen City Hall. You watch the minute hand go all the way over towards the top of the hour to be midnight. Suddenly it's midnight. There's no major event. You see the fireworks going off around it. And then when midnight is struck, you go and you hug and kiss your loved ones, and you also make sure that you keep paying attention because they'll then play the national anthem from a choir, usually in Copenhagen City Hall as well. It's a very almost demure and kind of a pleasant way to ring in the new year in that way. The U.S. is a little bit more raucous, though.
Yeah, and don't forget, in Denmark, you're also going to jump off of the couch. At least the Danes that we've celebrated New Year's with always make sure that we get up on the couch so that we can jump into the new year. And in the U.S., it's a little bit different. We, instead of focusing on the clock tower in Copenhagen City Hall, in the United States, you're going to be focusing on the Times Square. As Mike mentioned earlier, you're going to be looking for the ball to drop to signify in Times Square of New York City that we've entered the new year. And of course, at the stroke of midnight, you'll have all kinds of confetti, hugging and kissing your loved ones, and instead of the national anthem, we actually sing Old Lang Syng, which is a classic New Year song for ringing in the new year. So what about partying and nightlife? So if you want to get a little more raucous, and I don't know, we can barely make it up to midnight anymore at our old age, but when we were a little bit younger, we would maybe find it more common to go out to a bar or a club to celebrate New Year's Eve, and that's something that you can do in Denmark. The bars and the clubs are certainly open, and in at least the main cities, there are definitely options for doing something like that.
Yeah, in the U.S., we kind of call New Year's Eve amateur hour. I go back, like you said, to the early 20s and paying some exorbitant cover to go into some crappy bar to enjoy cheap, watered down drinks and sloppy people all over the place. I don't miss those days. Now, for a time, we also, with my friends, we would go and do like a dinner out at one of the restaurants. We did that a couple times in Philly, which was super nice to have a nice meal. But even so, I think I kind of like it better with a house party and kind of being with loved ones or friends or whatever and just have a nice, simple enjoyment in it. You can make it as exciting or as kind of boring as you want it to be. And I think, that, as you say, at our old age, boring and comfortable kind of feels nice.
Yeah, but I do miss those days. In the US, it used to be maybe $50 for a cover charge, but that would be open bar from maybe 9 p.m. until midnight. And then at midnight, they would have like a champagne toast and a DJ or band. And that was always kind of fun.
Yeah.
But, I like the way we do it now. Now, of course, at the stroke of midnight, we are officially in New Year's Day. And in Denmark, that, after you sleep for a little bit, becomes a bit of a quiet day. I would say it's mostly for people to be nursing their hangovers. And luckily, it's a day off of work, because January 1st is, of course, New Year's Day and an official public holiday in Denmark. So you can also expect that most things will be closed and there's not going to be a lot to do. Mostly, again, people will just be nursing their hangovers and getting ready to start the new year and the new work week.
In the U.S., it's a public holiday too, so almost everybody is off. But we tend to have actually a lot of pretty cool traditions, and some of them are more local. Like in Philadelphia, we have the famous Mummers Parade, which is kind of a crazy old tradition where people dress up in different troops or they have different string bands or different things like that that parade up Broad Street in Philadelphia, the main street, and then they have some competitions for the costumes and performances and things like that. There's other parades as well. Probably the most famous one is the Rose Bowl Parade in Pasadena, California. This is tied to one of the big other traditions that we have on New Year's Day in the U.S., which is college football. It's usually the big day where traditionally all the big bowl games were held for different teams to play each other on New Year's Day, the most famous one being the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl out in Los Angeles. So it's kind of a day that you sit again kind of on the couch nursing your hangover as well, eating some leftovers or ordering some pizzas and just watching football all day. There's other sports traditions that have crept in as well. There's always a big hockey game that goes on now, usually at an outdoor arena they call the Winter Classic, and other sports have kind of jumped onto that as well, since it's a captive audience, people that just don't want to leave their couch all day.
But sports are also a nice way to nurse your hangover. However, if you really want to see more of what we think of Danish holidays and see what our real thoughts are on some of our favorite Danish holidays, you'll have to click this video right here, and you can learn about more than just New Year's. But in the meantime, have a great New Year's, everybody.
Hi, hi.